Thanks for joining me. Let's see if we can make this big. And today we are going to start at 12:30 and we're going to wrap up at 12:50 to give everybody a chance to get back to work if that's what you're doing as you're hanging out with me during the lunch hour. Just making sure my sound is on. Checkity check. Awesome. Sweet. So today we are actually going to be talking about grit. Grit. What is it? Why do we got to have it? What is it made up of? How do we cultivate it? So grit is one of the things about grit that has me really fired up right now is that I feel like it's kind of a buzzword, and people, especially leaders, I feel like sometimes want to use it to their advantage without really understanding all the different concepts of it. So most people, they look at grit and they think of perseverance, right? The ability to stick with something, that's grit. The ability to, when faced with adversity, they keep going. That is how most people look at grit. And that is grit. That's an aspect of grit. And Angela Duckworth, who's the leading researcher on grit, she says grit is perseverance and also passion in pursuit of a long-term goal. In pursuit of a long-term goal. So again, we've got grit, and she says grit is made up of two elements. We've got passion and perseverance. Passion and perseverance, right? Most people mistakenly think it's just perseverance. So today we're going to talk about the 4 different psychological aspects of passion and perseverance. And we're also going to talk about 2 really important elements to developing skill and perseverance in yourself and also in others today, whether you're a leader, a teacher, a coach, a parent. The tips I'm going to give you today can help you develop it in yourself and in others. So grit, it's kind of a big deal. So if we want to truly live and lead our most authentic, most awesome, kick-ass lives, it doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes effort for us to be able to live and lead our most authentic, most awesome, kick-ass life. And the way the world is set up right now with media and instant gratification through the push of a button, the delivery at your door with food, whatever it may be, there's this, our culture really kind of goes against what grit stands for, because our culture is all about instant gratification. And I don't know about you, but in my life, I've heard people talk about marriages and relationships that if it's hard, it must not be meant to be. And I call BS on that one. If it's hard, then there's some new skills to develop. I mean, who really taught us how to be in marriage? If you really are committed to it, if you're passionate about it, and you're going to persevere, that's grit in a marriage. That's why people stay married for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. It's an extraordinary feat to be able to do that. And so if we're going to live and lead our most authentic, most awesome, kick-ass lives, we've got to develop grit. And again, grit has to do with passion and perseverance. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. But grit's also been associated with higher grades in school. It's also associated with greater happiness and success. It's also associated with, specifically, there's been a lot of people that have talked about West Point, and that the people who actually make it through training in West Point have higher levels of grit. We know that for sure. And when it comes to developing skills, grit is a predominant factor in helping you develop your skills so you can achieve the things you want to achieve. So, hey, we've got a couple people with us. Awesome. Thanks for joining me today. It's good to see you. I'm not sure who's with us today, but I'm excited you're here. Thanks for joining me. So passion and perseverance. This is where I think a lot of people get this wrong, is they just think grit is about perseverance, which we're going to talk about that. But one critical element that we've talked about the last couple of weeks on Thursdays is, what do you want? What do you want? What's the point of being gritty and persevering if you have no interest in it and you don't see any purpose in it? What's the point in being gritty, right? That's just drudgery. What we want to shoot for when it comes to grit is a combination of passion and perseverance. And the way Angela Duckworth breaks down passion for us, she identifies two psychological assets for passion, and she also identifies two psychological aspects for perseverance. So let's start with passion. When it comes to passion, what she's talking about there is two elements. The first one is an interest. Like, you don't have to be passionate about something right off the get-go, but you do. If you're going to be gritty about something, you've got to have a genuine interest and curiosity in it. And this is where the internal motivation comes from. There's an authentic desire, an authentic curiosity to learn how to do this, to learn more about this particular thing, to want to achieve a particular thing. There's an internal desire in your heart, in your soul, in your mind. There's a natural interest in it. That's the first aspect of passion, developing passion so we can have grit, is we've got to be interested in it. The second aspect of passion then is purpose. And purpose is really more of a external motivator in that it's going to contribute to the well-being of others. There's a higher purpose to it. So I might have an interest in environmental studies just because I'm genuinely curious about nature and trees and environment. And then when I combine that with a higher purpose of saving the planet, that's when grit can start to kick in. That's when we start to hit the passion mark. Is that I'm not only is it better for the world, but I have an intrinsic desire to learn about it. It's selfish and it's also selfless in that it serves to the greater good. The second aspect then of grit is perseverance. And again, there's two aspects to perseverance. The first aspect is practice, and this helps us maintain our grit in the short term. Is that, are you practicing each and every single day? So if your interest is in environmental studies, are you practicing it every single day? Are you getting out for a hike every single day? Are you looking in the microscope every single day? Are you studying the wisdom around it? Are you doing research studies? That's part of the practice of developing grit in that particular area, is you're exercising that practice every single day, and that's going to help you persevere because we have this natural desire to make progress. And when we're practicing it, something we're interested in that's in service to the greater good, we're going to feel more gritty. We're going to have a deeper level of grit to stick with it because we're also getting some dopamine hits from those instant gratifications of satisfying that curiosity right now. The second aspect of perseverance, psychological asset to develop in ourselves, is hope. Now, Angela Duckworth, when she talks about hope, she's not talking about naive hope. She's talking about that I believe there's going to be, there's chance for possibility of a better future, and I believe in my ability to influence that. I'm not just naively wishing for a better future. Hope in the sense of grit actually comes down to the science of hope, which is all about believing that there's going to be a higher or a better future, believing in my ability to contribute to that, to influence that, and being willing to take multiple pathways to get there. So as I was talking about earlier, if someone who has an interest maybe in environmental studies, there's an interest there, there's a higher goal there, there's a bigger purpose to save the planet potentially. They're practicing it day in and day out, and they believe through their efforts they can learn something new that might contribute to the well-being of the planet. They are willing to try different pathways to make that happen. They might go to this university to study it, and that may not work out, so they might go join some other organizations to develop their skills and their knowledge even further, but they're willing to take multiple pathways to close the gap between where they are and where they want to be. So we got to have hope for a better future. So when it comes to living and leading our most authentic, most awesome kick-ass lives, grit is about having passion and perseverance to stick with it for the long term. To stick with it for the long term. It's a combination of interest plus purpose plus practice daily plus hope for a future that's better than it is right now. So those are the four aspects of it. And just a little side note there. I, again, feel like most people get grit wrong and they focus on perseverance over passion. They just want their kids to be grittier. They just want their students to be grittier. They just want them to persevere. They just want their employees to persevere. And they're not thinking about the intrinsic motivation of passion and also the intrinsic daily motivation of practice every single day. Because if I'm an employee working for a leader and I don't have clear expectations around what to do today, that is going to be very, very difficult for me to persevere because I can't practice it. That's the practice of developing the skills, of following the algorithm, of working the workflow. That's the daily practice. And if I don't know, especially in an environment like COVID, where how we used to go about doing work, what may have been clear, for everybody, it all blew up with COVID. The practice was destroyed because we went home and started doing it differently. And without great leadership in self-leadership or leadership from your boss potentially, we may not have cultivated a good practice to help us remain gritty so we can persevere. And one thing that's very difficult about right now with COVID, with persevering, is that it's difficult that when it first happened, it was like, oh, we're going to be at home for 3 weeks. Well, when was that? Right? So when it comes to cultivating hope, it's almost like there's no end in sight. So the perseverance can start to dwindle in that aspect. So again, perseverance has to do with the long-term perseverance of sticking to a goal, a worthy goal that you're passionate about, that you're interested in, and then also the daily practice of it, the structure of it, of knocking it out day in and day out. So that's passion and perseverance. We've got to have both if we want to live and lead our most authentic, most awesome kick-ass lives. We got to have that grit in there. What questions do you guys have so far? I'm going to bring up another aspect of this too. Hey, thanks for joining me today. We've got a couple viewers. Really appreciate you being here. So another thing to think about when it comes to grit that I wanted to bring up today is that when it comes to parenting, leadership, coaching, those types of things, there are two components that we really want to focus on if we want to develop grit in ourselves as a self-leader, right? And develop grit in others as a leader of others, as a coach of others, as a parent of others. And in the book Grit, Angela Duckworth, she points out this, that parenting actually comes from the root word, which means to bring forth, to bring forth. So parenting means to bring forth. Bring forth what? The interests, the abilities, the talents, and the potential of our children. That's parenting, is to bring forth. That's the root word of parenting. And when I think about my studies in leadership and coaching others and my undergrad degree in psychology too, and my master's in organizational leadership and all of that, this is essentially the main job and responsibility of leaders, is to bring forth the talent, the potential, the skills on the people on your team for that shared purpose, that shared goal, right? So we want to bring forth the interests, the talents, the potentials of the people in front of us through parenting, through coaching, through leadership. And when I talk about leadership, when I talk about coaching, when I talk about parenting, I'm also talking about self-parenting, self-coaching, self-leadership, to bring forth, to create the conditions to release my potential, to develop my skills and talents. And so there's two key components we want to think about here. And I saw this demonstrated here locally at Rogers High School when they brought in a new principal, probably about, I think it was about 7 years ago, where what she did when she went in there is that this is a low-income school. And, you know, the natural inclination sometimes of people is to then lower the expectations. She actually went in there and raised the expectations. She raised the expectations. And then what she also did by raising the expectations of parents or of faculty and also of students is she raised support. So the two key elements to wise parenting, that's what Angela Duckworth calls it, is wise parenting. I would offer that it also has to do with wise leadership and wise coaching, is that we want to have high standards and we want to have high support. High standards and high supports. And one of the best ways to look at this that I have found is by drawing it on a little graph like this. So we've got our standards, which are, I think it's looking correctly for you. Low standards over here, high standards over here, low support down here, high support up here. So wise parenting falls over here in this corner where we have really, really, really high standards and also really, really high support. And I would encourage us to think about that if you're in a leadership position, if you're in a coaching position, whether it's sports coaching, life coaching, executive coaching, is to increase the level, the high standards, and increase the support at the same time. What we typically see is more of a a laissez-faire kind of leadership style, which is low support, low standards, right? Maybe permissive. And there's a model in leadership called Blake Mouton, and this is called country club leadership, which is permissive leadership, which is really, really high support, but like zero to no expectations. Like nobody's held accountable. That's kind of the the permissive style of leadership and parenting, is that there's really no consequences to whether we win the game or not, whether we are making progress in the direction of our dreams and goals. It really doesn't matter. And then, of course, we've all had parenting that's been authoritative or leadership that's been authoritative, which is really, really high standards and really, really cold presence to them. Right. One thing that's been on my mind recently is, do you guys watch Ted Lasso? I just love that movie or that show. And when you think about their style, the coaching staff with Ted Lasso, um, where does Ted really kind of fall in that standard, right? High support, high standards, or what? Where does Ted fall in there? If you're in the comments there, drop it in the comments below if you know Ted Lasso. Where does he fall when it comes to developing grit, developing skills in his teams? Does he have high standards, high support? Is he more of the wise parenting, permissive parenting, neglectful, or authoritative? So one thing that's been surprising me, of course, Ted kind of falls over in the permissive, right? And he's aware of that. And that's probably why he recently brought Roy back, right? And Roy, although he comes across kind of authoritative, there's a warmth to him too. There's a warmth to his style. And I would argue that Roy, even though he drops F-bombs all the time, and he calls the little kids in the show wonkers and things like that, he's more of that wise parenting, because there's a sternness to him. There's high expectations, but there's also like a warmth and a tenderness to him as well. So if we want to develop the skills and talents and bring forth that potential in ourselves and others, we want to have really, really high expectations and standards for ourselves. And we also want to bring a lot of support, meaning a lot of warmth, compassion, encouragement, but not neglecting the standards. We can still get there and we can still hold those high expectations while also being offering a lot of support. So that's it today. I mentioned we were going to stop at 10 till. I'll stick around for questions afterwards. That's the major content for anyone that's got a jet. Go ahead and do that. We started at 12:30. We ended at 12:50 today talking about grit. We talked about the fact that grit is passion plus perseverance in achieving long-term goals. It's not just perseverance. Perseverance without passion is drudgery. When it comes to cultivating passion in ourselves and others, we want to look at internal motivators such as your interest in things, as well as a higher purpose for the work that we're doing. That's going to help you cultivate that passion both internally and externally. We also want to work on perseverance in our daily practice. That's going to help us persevere daily because we're making some progress. We're taking some action that's clear, it's concise. People are supporting us with that practice every single day. And then we're also having hope that we believe the future can be better than the present, and our effort can contribute to that, and we're willing to take multiple pathways to get there. That's what grit is all about. And then the last part is that when it comes to bringing forth the potential in ourselves and within others, we want to be cognizant of those two elements, that we're bringing just the right amount of expectations and matching it with the right amount of support, that we're not coming across permissive or neglectful in our parenting, coaching, leadership style, or authoritative. We're actually moving into that wise leadership, that wise coaching, and that wise parenting. And when it comes to living and leading our most authentic, most awesome, kick-ass lives, that's where it's at. Now, the last couple of weeks, this is bonus round. For those of you who got a jet, go ahead and go. But bonus round wise, we're back to the question we started with when we started with these Facebook Lives. What do I want? Are my behaviors helping me get what I want? When it comes to the passion question and grit, you got to know, what are you interested in? What do you care about? And we can't think our way to that. We got to go in there and try stuff out. If you think you might like pottery, you're not going to learn if you like pottery by watching it on YouTube. You actually got to go put your fingers in the clay. Try it out. That's how you're going to understand if you really, really want this thing in your life, is go out there and try it out. And last week we talked about asking those questions too. Again, what do I want? What do I really, really want? We have to start with that before we create a system for achieving what we want. And if we're going to live authentically and wholeheartedly, it comes from our own deep desire, which I think is one of the reasons why it's so challenging to cultivate grit at work, is that a lot of people in the workforce haven't done the internal exploration of what am I interested in? What am I passionate about? And what organization would I love to be a part of to help fulfill that interest and that passion for the greater good? Now, as leaders, there are still things you can do to help cultivate that, help them make the connections between how their daily work is impacting the greater good, how their daily work is helping them develop knowledge and skills that's going to help them with their grit. For those of you sticking around, Debbie, me too. Ted Lasso is awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to head out. If you have questions, please drop them in the box. I'll stick around here just for a second to see if there's any questions, comments. If there's a topic you'd love me to share within the future, I am getting gritty about doing these Thursday sessions, persevering. I plan on doing these indefinitely. So I would love to meet you wherever you're at, whatever would be most helpful for you in your journey towards living authentically and wholeheartedly. Go ahead and leave a comment below, a question below around grit, around topics you would love to see more of. I'm here to serve. Again, my name is Lori Mage. I'm a life and leadership coach. I bring 20 years of experience, over 20 years of experience coaching, leading, teaching others all about leadership, human potential, productivity, you name it. I've dived into it quite a bit. So, Barney, I love you so much. Thank you for being here, Barney. Yeah, and Debbie, yeah, grit has been a trendy idea in education for a bit and has also drawn some criticism. Is this something you see in leadership field too? Absolutely. Yes, most definitely. Some criticism in there. And you've probably heard a lot about growth mindset too, Debbie, as a way to cultivate grit, growth mindset. One of the criticisms I think from grit in the workplace may not necessarily come from leaders, but I'm hearing it from employees that, fine, we'll be gritty. To what end? When is this gonna stop? Like, and this is where I think hope needs to be configured into the factors, because if we're not helping people cultivate passion, their interests, their purpose, and giving them hope that it's not going to always be this hard, always this bad, then their grit is going to start to wane. And so I think there's some concern of potentially employees saying, yeah, I can be gritty for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, but 18 months in this relentless workload and we're not doing anything different about it, that definitely wanes on people. So I think there's a sustainability around it with grit. And I think one of the other things that people misunderstand about grit is they think that it's about intensity. And really, grit is about stamina. It's about consistency. It's about being able to do it for the long run. And so if we've got people operating at a level 100 and they're persevering day after day, week after week, and so on, that is not sustainable. And so they're going to crash. They're either going to crash and leave the organization, right? They're going to opt out, or they're going to start calling in sick, or they're going to get injured, right? There's going to be a break somewhere. So when it comes to grit, we have to be thinking about whatever practice we're doing daily, is it sustainable for our long-term goals, right? And we have to be constantly thinking about that sustainability. Like when I think about, even in the school world, Debbie, potentially of like grit right before a final, leading up to a test. But what we're talking about is grit for getting your master's degree, grit for graduating high school, not just this one class, but the 30 classes you have to take to graduate high school. You know what I mean? So that's some of the criticism inside of organizations. Also, on a personal note, when it comes to potential criticism with grit, is that I think I have had leaders come to me and be like, I just need my employees to be more gritty. They just want them to quit whining is basically what they want. And it's like, that's not grit. Like, do they have meaning and purpose at work? Like, are what you're asking them to do day in and day out not sustainable? Do they not have hope for a better future? Are you empowering them? Those types of things. So I think that grit can also get a bad rap that way, because it's also like, Debbie, another thing that comes with a little bit of weight, I guess, inside of organizations is the idea of accountability. Is that I'll have leaders come to me and be like, I just need my people to be more accountable. And I need them to be able to take feedback. Feedback's a big pet peeve of mine, because not because people don't need them, because a lot of leaders, when it comes to feedback, what I see, what they actually want through feedback is that they want permission to be able to tell people what to do and how to do it. Where from a coaching perspective, that's focused on the development of the human potential, it's not about telling them what to do or how to do it. It's about feedback to say, what's working, what's not working, how do you think that went, right? It's cultivating the self-awareness for them to course correct and perform better and feel more confident and competent about the work that they're doing, versus the feedback I often hear from, or leaders requesting and wanting to be able to give feedback to people, is to be able to give them a directive. There's a big difference, right? Between feedback that's geared at as being a directive versus feedback that's really going to actually help bring forth the potential in the other human being, bring forth the talent, the strengths, the interests of the other human being. You know, when it comes to even back to grit inside of an organization, are we engaging staff, even inside of schools, of touching base with them about kind of how are you doing? How long can we do this? If it never changes, what are our potential solutions? So we can start to cultivate hope for the long term. And also, I think a big miss inside of organizations is the practice aspect. People just don't know. They lost all the structure they had, so they either have to reinvent the structure to help them persevere. Does that make sense, Debbie? Yep, Debbie says both grit and growth mindset have been picked up by many as tools to fix kids. Yeah. Without us having to change our practices and systems. Yeah. I get it. Totally. For sure. Debbie, thanks for being here. I appreciate you. I hope you got my message today about systems too. So we'll have to do one on systems. You guys, thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate it. If you got value today, please give me a thumbs up. Give me a heart. Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you think someone would benefit from this, please share it with them. I will be doing more in the future. I want to get good at this, so I'm committed to being gritty with it. I believe I've got some experiences that can help the world in some way, shape, or form. If you've got topics you've loved to learn about, please message them to me. It is truly my goal with these videos is to help you live and lead your most authentic, most awesome kick-ass life. However you define it, I want you to feel that deep sense of flourishing and that you lived your life the way you wanted to live it, that you actualized your potential. That is my goal, and I've got some ideas around that. that I'd love to continue sharing with you on Thursdays. And if you've got any questions around success, around productivity, around achievement, around habits, around confidence, any of those things, throw them in the comments below. Send me a direct message. I'd be happy to talk about those going forward. That's it today. Thanks so much for joining me. I will see you later. Bye.